Welcome back, E7 fam, to another how to play video guide. This one will be on the Sorceress Edda, not to be confused with the Sorceress Edea who killed Squall at the end of Disc 1. As with all of my how to play videos, I'll be going super in depth and covering almost everything you could want to know about the character, including things like stats, skills, possible endgame equipment builds for you to try out, as well as general world arena matchup knowledge. So with our introduction out of the way, let's move on to Edda's stats. Edda is an Ice Mage of the Aries zodiac symbol. She is the only one that has her stat line. Taking a closer look at her stats, she has 1,255 attack, 5,016 health, 106 speed, 652 base defense, 27% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 5% dual attack chance, 18% effectiveness, and no effect resistance. Overall, an excellent stat line for a mage. It is way above average in terms of attack, starting critical hit chance, and starting effectiveness. It also has very good defense, which is to be expected from a mage. It has poor health and average to slightly below average speed, but those again are to be expected of a mage. As a bit of trivia before moving on to the skill section, in the Japanese dub of Epic 7, Edda is voiced by Yuko Goto, who you can hear as Saikawa in Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, as well as Mikuru Asahina from one of my favorite anime of all time, The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. In the English dub of Epic 7, however, Edda is voiced by Ann Yatko, who you can hear as the Raiden Shogun in Genshin Impact, as well as Kugisaki Nobara from Jujutsu Kaisen. As one final piece of information before moving on to the skill section, Anne was kind enough to provide me with a signed print of her character Edda. I would like to give this signed print away to one lucky viewer as my way of giving back and giving thanks for all the support over the last several months that you have all shown me. If you want to learn more on how to have a chance to win this signed print of Edda, please see the end of the video for more details.
It's been so long.
Edda's S1 is Icy Impact. It has a 1x attack multiplier. Additionally, it has a 65 to 75% chance to defense break the target for one turn. This is a fairly standard and average S1 for a damage dealer.
Someone could die. I can do it.
Edda's S2 is Cold Snap. It has a 3 to 4 turn cooldown depending on Molagora, and you acquire 2 souls upon use. It is an AoE attack with a 0.9x attack multiplier. It dispels 2 buffs from all enemies before pushing back their combat readiness by a random amount between 15 and 40%. She was also buffed so that this move now also gives a skill nullifier once in order to help her survivability and to counter a lot of characters that have counter set style mechanics.
Cold, loneliness, pain.
Cold Snap is a fairly powerful move, and we'll talk a little bit more about it in the Soulburn section, but this is essentially the opener that Edda wants to be using at the start of a fight. She does have debuffs in her kit, and normally characters that are trying to land specific debuffs are using a move like this in order to actually open up the opponent and make sure they do not have immunity set. Edda's S3 is Absolute Zero. It has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Molagora, and you acquire 3 souls upon use. It is an AoE attack with a slightly above average attack modifier of 1.05x. It has a 65 to 85% chance depending on Molagora to stun all enemies for 1 turn. When this skill is available and an ally on her team uses a non-attack skill, Edda will also increase her combat readiness by 20%.
The icy touch of death shall embrace you. Someone.
It may not seem like it, but when they pseudo reworked Edda, dropping the critical hit chance requirements off of all of her moves was really nice, but this pseudo passive attached to Absolute Zero is an absolute godsend. Having that extra 20% combat readiness push on her when you use another non-attack skill on her team is what allows Edda to really function and be a good character in the current metagame. Usually, you had to decide between having a bunch of attack and a bunch of crit chance, or a bunch of crit chance and a bunch of effectiveness to do the job, but regardless of what you ended up choosing, you couldn't get enough of it and still have enough speed for Edda to actually be a reliable opener or a reliable damage dealer. With the change to absolute 0, you can bring a much faster character than her that uses a non-attack skill, and most openers these days have quite a number of non-attack skills, and that allows her to essentially get a bunch of speed that she doesn't actually have to incorporate into her build, and we've taken that into account, and we'll talk more about that in the character build section. Edda's Soul Burn is on her S2 Cold Snap. It gives her an extra turn at the cost of 20 souls. If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you know extra turns are usually pretty broken. They're amongst the very best soul burns in the entire game, and Edda falls more in the category of that really broken extra turn, as opposed to, say, the one that's not so good, like compared to Fairy Tail Tenebria. So yeah, you're paying 20 souls at the start for Edda to essentially use her opener, make sure they have no immunity on them, do a bunch of damage to them, take an extra turn, and that guarantees sets you up for a potential S3 absolute 0, which can stun the entire enemy team. It is a very, very powerful combo, and you'll find when we talk about her in the build section that she's probably going to end up being on Tehegel's Ancient Book in order to leverage this really, really powerful soul burn. It is a very devastating combo, and that plus the change to the CR push on S3 is the main reasons why you are starting to see her see more play in things like World Arena. When it comes to Molagora priorities, you're going to want to invest in absolute 0 first because it has the extra stun chance on it as well as the reduced cooldown, and it is the move that does the most amount of damage on the character, and most of the time I think you're going to be playing Edda more as a damage dealer than playing her as something like a debuffer, so I think this is really the one you want to invest in first and foremost. But you shouldn't overlook the S2, which I think is the one that you should invest in second. You're getting the -1 turn cooldown, which is nice, but again, this is part of your main damage dealing combo, so you really want this and S3 maxed out if you're intending to play Edda at all as sort of either a cleave or essentially a pocket damage dealer, AoE damage dealer. So these two are the ones you definitely want to be maxing out if you want to play the character. You don't really need to max the S1. If you want to play the character, it's more of a nice to have, because usually when you're playing Edda, the match should basically be finished by the time you've used her S2 and her S3. She is not really designed for long fights. As you notice, this kit doesn't really have any survivability on it outside of a single skill nullifier. So it should be indicative of how the character is played. Again, S3 and S2 first, and then if you just really like the character, invest in S1 last. Edda was originally designed as a debuff/damage hybrid character that required crit chance to accomplish her goals. By the time you were done gearing her to do her job, however, she either wasn't fast enough to take a turn, or she simply just didn't do enough damage to actually make use of all the crit chance on her. This obviously is no longer the case, since they removed the need for crit chance in her kit and have given her a pseudo passive which will allow her to take turns in a timely fashion. The result should have been a character who could now follow up as a secondary debuffer, since you aren't locked into playing a crit chance build on her. In actuality, what happened, however, though, is that the character essentially just became a female Arbiter Vildred. With good multipliers, 1200 plus base attack, and one of the best soul burns in the game, Edda is a monster cleave character in her current iteration. The fact that she can strip buffs and stun lock enemies is just icing on the cake. The first build that I'm going to show you in this video is essentially what I just said, a female Arbiter Vildred. You could build her as a debuffer, but it produces nowhere near as much results as a pure glass cannon DPS build that is hell-bent on becoming a meme descending mage. When we take a look at the actual builds here, we want to be on a speed crit set. Although I guess you could play speed any. The reason we don't play immunity is because Edda is most likely, when chosen and played properly, almost always going to get her first turn before the enemy gets their first turn. So there's no reason to use immunity. Instead, we just take crit chance because she's an AoE character, therefore cannot use penetration set, and therefore we also are just getting the most amount of stats. Speed crit just gives you the most amount of free stats for the character and makes her the easiest to gear. Looking at the desired stats, we want 3500 attack, although you can play more. I actually play near 4000 on my Edda, as much as you can get here without sacrificing too much. Defense, I have 1100. So that way you might possibly survive a hit if things go wrong. If you are confident in your speed characters, your speed openers on this character, you don't need to play any defense whatsoever. As always with any mages, they don't really have particularly great health. I have 8,500 health here. That is simply edit on a plus 30 artifact with an I-90 helmet with a little bit of extra wiggle room. It's like less than 100 HP. If you do all that, you should have around 84 and change. I've just decided to round it up to 8,500 for this video. For speed, I have 210 as the lowest that I would go. A lot of Edda players play around 220 from what I know, and some of the really, really insane ones can play as high as 240. Again, if you're dropping your defense and have really good gear, you can make her go even faster, although I've found that based on what your openers are and what your composition is, speed isn't really as important because that 20% CR passive push on the S3 really is just that huge. I think it's just simply better to go all in on damage on this character. Critical hit chance is 100% and critical hit damage is 280% because we just want to do as much as possible. Effectiveness is only her base at 18%, which may surprise some of you because the character was originally billed as a debuffer. Well, she just has high attack and really high damage. And while it's cool that you can stun people, you can do a stun on most DPSs, the ones that would actually endanger your team, with no real base effectiveness whatsoever. You have a pretty good chance of actually landing it. So I don't really feel like we need to invest in effectiveness. The best debuff in the game is essentially your opponent's dying. Player removal is the best debuff in the entire game, so you might as well just go all in on damage. Taking a look at the right side, we are on a crit damage necklace, an attack percentage ring, and speed boots. That is simply just the default configuration for a damage dealer. It just gives you the most amount of damage. The artifact is Tehagel's Ancient Book. I think it is the best artifact on the character. It is also the most common one, the one that most people watching this video have access to. Her soul burn just really is that insane. It is that powerful. So I just don't see a reason why you would want to use it unless you already play a lot of book holders in the compositions that you're playing. If you're a dedicated Cleave player and you're always drafting 2 to 3 mages every single draft, then you can just play her on a artifact that increases her damage like Portrait of the Savior or a Symbol of Unity. Those obviously all work. And again, it's going to depend on you, your playstyle, and what characters you like pairing her with. Taking a look at the per piece average, we want 19% attack, 7 speed, 10% crit chance, and 12% crit damage. The second build that I want to show you all is a more damage oriented build for players that are looking to just get the most amount of damage out of their Edda, and especially for those of you that are trying to play her with at least 2 non-attack skills per team. A lot of Cleave players, a lot of Cleave openers, you probably guys already know, there are a lot of non-attack skills on openers nowadays. If your team that you're drafting Edda with is usually going to be having 2 or 3 or more non-attack skills, then this might be a build for you. Keep in mind, the pseudo passive on Absolute Zero, her S3, is not a once per turn trigger. It will trigger on every non-attack skill until you actually use the S3. What that means is certain openers such as Conqueror Lilius can provide 40% combat readiness with just her S3 into S2 combo. And then you have compositions such as Ran and Summertime Hysteria, which can give you 20% from Ran, 20% extra from proccing the S2 passive on Summertime Hysteria, as well as the 15% that passive actually gives. That is a 55% combat readiness push and allows you to play more damage on a slower Edda and basically get a bigger cleave off, a bigger amount of damage out of this character. So that is the purpose of this build. We're going to be on Destruction Crit, although you could play Attack Crit. Looking at the desired stats, we want 4,000 attack or higher. I've seen very close to 4,200 or more on this on Destruction set, although if you're on attack, it's obviously going to be a bit higher. The defense and health are basically as low as we can get. We're just trying to go big damage. This is a full glass cannon build. There's no room for survivability on a build like this. For the speed, I have 175. We are again on either destruction or attack, so we're not going to be as fast, but we don't need it because we're getting huge CR pushes because we're going to be pairing her with a lot of strong openers that have non-attack skills, multiple non-attack skills, to really zip her to the actual front of the line. Critical hit chance is 100%. Crit hit damage is 320% or more on destruction set. Obviously, it's going to be less if you're on that attack set. Taking a look at the right side pieces, it's still the same. Crit damage, attack percentage ring, speed boots. We're just trying to do as much damage as possible in a timely fashion. You probably could go an attack percentage boot, but I feel like at that point, She might be a little bit too slow. You might not have enough non-attack skills to have her cut in front of their opener, and that's a problem. So that's why I think we still are going to be on speed boots. Nothing has changed on the artifacts. It's still exactly the same as last time. Looking at the per piece average, you want 25% attack, 5 speed, 10% crit chance, 8% crit damage. Please do note, I recognize 25% attack is very, very high, but do not neglect flat attack on pieces when you're already overshooting somewhere else. So if you already have a piece that's giving like 14 or 15 speed, make sure that that piece can also have some like attack percentage and flat attack, and especially the ring. You want a lot of flat attack on the ring in order to make sure that you can hit those high attack numbers. Flat attack, again, is one of those stats that's just super slept on, but is very important to hit certain damage thresholds, to hit those really, really high highs on certain damage dealers. Most of Edda's power comes from leveraging her soul burn combo, and in order to get that off, you need to have a fast opener on her team or some kind of support style character that can use a non-attack skill to get that 20% CR push that is kind of like a pseudo passive on her S3, Absolute Zero. Luckily for us, there are quite a number of very strong openers in the format, and that's why you usually see Edda with a number of Cleave openers, because she just synergizes incredibly well with Cleave compositions in general, although there are a couple here that I'll mention that are good in standard compositions as well. Obviously, she's going to be very good with Pera, Ran, and Summertime Assaria. These are basically the mainstays of Cleave in the current format. They are just incredibly powerful openers with incredibly strong non-attack skills, and all of their skills plus Edda and her soul burn combo can essentially wipe out an entire enemy team. Summertime Assaria is one that many of you probably may not understand why, but her S2 passive that puts the bombs on the enemy team, that is considered a non-attack skill. So that will trigger the 20% combat readiness push from Absolute Zero. So if you have a fast character, someone that is got an AoE attack, not necessarily a non-attack skill, that can proc Summertime Assaria, that will proc Edda and bring her along with it. She's also very, very good with Conqueror Lilius and Angel of Light Angelica. These are just generically strong and almost oppressive openers that can go in any team composition. They have really debilitating non-attack skills on their S3s each. So obviously these are great additions, great things to pair Edda with as well. And then for you standard players, she's obviously very good with Amelia, because you can use the non-attack skill to zip someone else potentially to the front and bring Edda as well. So you can essentially get 2 for the price of 1. Or you can just bring Edda to the front and give her an attack buff and ensure that your Cleave hits for massive amounts of damage. Finally, as sort of a flavor win, she is very good with Politis on her team. If your opponent uses a non-attack skill, that can potentially, use a S2 from Politis, and that will pave the way for Edda, kind of soften them up and get rid of any potential excess buffs that they have as well on the team. I think these two synergize really well. It also allows you to play potentially a damage artifact on Edda and have Politis be the one that holds the Tehagel's Ancient Book to set up the combo. Politis just in general is just a very, very good character to have on any Cleave composition, because, spoiler alert, she is a bad matchup for a lot of the characters that are all going to be on Edda's team. So by having Politis, you essentially have not only more flexibility in your builds, but you also deny your opponent from a potential terrible matchup. For good matchups, what Edda really excels against is kind of like the standard bruiser style compositions. She has so much damage in her kit and so many debuffs in her kits that really it's very difficult for your opponent to stand up to it, especially if you set it up correctly with something like a vigor buff from Conqueror Lilius or a potential defense break from a character like Ron. Edda will just wipe them out completely. The compositions that are usually playing things like Mediator Coeric or like a Fallen Cecilia or another Aureus holder, she's usually very, very strong in those scenarios because they're not fast enough to contest the combo, to really stop the combo, and you will either outright kill them or completely cripple the team composition. Usually you see characters such as like a Spectre Tenebria on those teams. You do so much AoE damage that even if they have a ton of mitigation, you will literally just blast past it and kill the Spectre outright. So she's very good there. Obviously, if they don't have a ton of mitigation, you can even use her as a counter to a character such as Arbiter Vildred or anyone else that has a built-in revive. The S2 Soulburn will essentially kill the Arbiter, he'll revive, you take your extra turn, and then you just S3 and get rid of him, which makes Edda a prime pick as a Cleave composition or a Cleave choice versus Arbiter Builder because he's a common character that people play against Cleave in hopes of being able to kill them, since Cleave comps are usually fairly squishy. So yeah, assuming you're playing against a standard / bruiser style composition, I think Edda is one of the stronger Cleave characters that you could play into them. And finally, let's talk about Edda's bad matchups. A couple of them should be fairly obvious. Edda is a blue damage dealer and a blue debuffer, so obviously she's not going to do super good against a lot of the green DPSs, a lot of the green heroes. There are ones that are especially played very frequently against the types of compositions that she likes to be in, so you really want to avoid bringing her into characters such as Green Violet, Rimuru, or Senya. These are all incredibly powerful characters that can very easily shut down the aggressive compositions that Edda really wants to be a part of. Obviously, she's not super great against anyone with counter mechanics, especially AoE counter mechanics in general. So she's really not super good against Rem. She's not super great against Belian either. And then finally, two other characters I want to, touch on. The first of which is Politis. We already talked about her as a potential good teammate. Politis in general is just very strong against a lot of the compositions that Edda likes to be on. They want to be using non-attack skills in order to boost up the Edda, and Politis usually shuts non-attack skills down hard, especially if they're on something like Abyssal Crown. It could potentially stun your Edda, and it just basically lights out. That's why I usually prefer to pair Politis and Edda together. I think they go well together because it is a potential roadblock, something that completely can shut down your entire composition. So that's why I do not like playing Edda into Politis if at all possible. And then finally, there is Elena. Elena is very good against a lot of AoE compositions in general. You have a lot of AoE damage, obviously, in your kit. She can mitigate that as well as heal up some of that if you don't outright one-shot anybody. So that can be a potential roadblock. She might be able to cut in front of specific people as well, set up a potential invincibility that you essentially will have to burn an S3 to get through. And, it really just cuts the whole combo in half. There are some compositions, I believe some Summertime Hysteria compositions don't really care about Elena. So if you have like Summertime Hysteria and Edda together, you don't really need to worry too much about Elena, but it is something you have to be mindful of. You have to think about the interactions between Elena and the characters on your team and determine, is this actually a bad matchup or can I let it through? But again, I usually like to do things for completeness sake, so I figured I would mention Elena here. And that is going to do it for how to play Edda. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I will be giving away a signed print of her by her English voiceover artist. If you would like a chance to win this print, you need only join my Discord. I will leave a link to it down in this video's description. In 1 week's time, that is on February 17th, I will choose a random non-moderator member of my Discord, DM them, and hopefully get their contact information and mail this to them no matter where they are in the world. So again, if you'd like a chance to try to win this print, again, all you need to do is join my Discord. And thank you all again for all of the wonderful support you guys have given me over the last several months. If you'd like to see more Epic 7 how to play videos done in this style, there should be a playlist on your screen now. And as always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I will catch you all hopefully very soon with how to play Belian. Later.